سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. السلام.
But do you think we could learn the lessons without telling the truth about the last 20 years? The last 20-year war in Afghanistan is a lie. The Americans lied to their people. The Americans spent over $2.2 trillion, and over $2 trillion of it went to private contractors. They used the war as a way of funneling US taxpayers' money to the private entities. What did the EU do with our money? Where did it go? How much did the EU spend in Afghanistan in the 20 years? Apart from enriching the families connected to the government, what else do we do with it? How much evidence have you got of the infrastructure you just kept talking about? Before the Taliban took over, the number of Afghans living in poverty in Afghanistan has doubled since 2001. A third have no food, half of them have no drinking water, and 2/3 have no electricity. Before the rise of the Taliban, who grew from US and Saudi-funded the Mujahideen, half of Afghan university students were women. 40% of the country's doctors were women. 70% of their teachers were women. 30% of their civil servants were women. Look at the place now. We've helped to destroy it.
On paper, the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces had around 300,000 troops, but because of widespread corruption, this number was likely much lower.
For years, I've been writing about the fact that the government was a corrupt government, that aid and money went in and these officials pocketed it. And the fact that Ghani and his cohort ended up taking, from what we understand, bags of money with them on their way out, again shows that money was more important than people's lives.
If I say the probability of this country falling back into anarchy is 50-50, what probability would you agree to?
The probability is much less than 50, but
significant probability then.
But I think it means my answer. It means that we don't have a time to rest.
As founder of what was once a security firm, Blackwater, he wants to send about 5,000 private military contractors to replace troops helping the Afghan army. He believes his plan would cut the annual cost of the war to less than $10 billion for an estimated $45 billion.
Okay, so have I ever known anyone who got a six-figure overseas job that didn't have a military background? On the defense side of things, I would say about half the people I knew working in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kuwait were never in the military at all.
In 10 years, he has grown a tiny American contract into a giant conglomerate. It's pumped $15 million back into the economy so far.
This is even true on the security side of things, where law enforcement professionals are needed to train foreign police forces, set up academies, prisons, and develop judicial procedures. Having a law enforcement background rather than a military one can definitely be a huge asset right now.
Afghanistan's most famous gun for hire. He leapt to international notoriety 18 months ago when he was disowned by the US government and arrested in Kabul for alleged kidnap and torture. At his trial, he insisted he'd worked both under the Afghan government and the Pentagon. Jackie Damer was convicted by a Kabul court and jailed for 5 years. Was he working for the Americans, the Afghans, or himself? Was Jackie Damer a con man or a fall guy? A deniable asset or a bloody liability?
But if you want to work either in the skilled trades or in a base post office or as a fireman, then obviously you can be qualified to do that without ever having been in the service. The same goes for the white-collar fields. Finance, HR, IT, admin support. Rarely do those fields ask for a prior military person.
Iraq, Afghanistan, and the war on terror have stretched our regular armies to the limit. Never before have mercenaries been so highly prized. Companies like this outfit, Global Strategies Group, are making a killing.
In your article, you talk about something called poppy palaces. What's that?
Right. Well, those are houses in Kabul in relatively upscale areas where rents run in the thousands or up to $10,000 that are frequently owned by either Afghan officials or those connected with them, who would seem to have no legal means to own that sort of real estate, much less the expensive armored vehicles, which are often pulled up around. When you see these buildings, that's not normal money, that's drug money. He said the ministers and the governors are behind the drug dealers, and sometimes they are the drug dealers. And that was a sentiment that I heard across the board with, again, this more than 24 current and former Afghan officials. And, you know, to emphasize, these are men who working in a government backed by the United States, often in security or intelligence positions in the south of Afghanistan.
The same people have the best in Afghanistan too. These private villas are some of the most desirable addresses in Kabul. A reminder perhaps of what most Afghans who are surviving on less than $1 a day don't have. And they can rent for $30,000 a month. The super rich Afghans who are living here are protected by all the security that money can buy. High-ranking politicians and businessmen are still buying the most expensive homes, we are told. One of them, who lives on the Palm, told me Afghan warlords own almost a quarter of properties here. So, the luxury and security of Dubai is still the main attraction for many Afghans with money to spare. But you haven't invested in the country, why not?
Because of the political situation at the moment, I think, and for the security reason.
And why invest there when you can spend your money in exclusive Palm Jumeirah, secure and tax-free?
Another of the men I interviewed, a man by the name of Mohammed Hussein Andiwal, a former police chief in Helmand province, said that if he had a map in front of him, he could sketch out a drug ring involving several regional and high-ranking Afghan officials that push heroin through Nimroz province into Iran. But he said that the principal thing standing between him doing that, him knowing that and him doing that, was that he would be killed.
But the desperate state of the economy is threatening the nation. Tax and customs earnings are down. The wartime bubble of international military spending has burst.
What's astonishing is that it's so open. It's illegal, of course, but apparently everybody's into it. There's no embarrassment, no shame, but then if you were dirt poor, would you be doing the same?
فالمن کې ډېر غربت دی تقریبا وچکالۍ دی او خلک د جنګو ځپلي دي او کډي مهاجر شوي دي نو په دغه وجه باندې هم خلک دا یو عواید جوړوي دا تریاک په دغه وجه باندې هم خلک ډېر کړي انشاءالله کوشش کوي چې دې ته بدیل پیدا کړي بیا به خلک دا شی وکړي چې هغه به تقریبا د تریاکو په پرتله باندې تریاکو بدیل
Some of the traders here in Kabul's money market are quite wealthy men. This is a very, very busy place because much of the economic activity of this country is carried out in cash. That's because much of it is illegal. That's because half the national income of this country, 50% of it, comes from growing opium and selling heroin. David Sedney is the Deputy American Ambassador in Afghanistan. I just couldn't believe my eyes down in Kandahar with the convoys of American soldiers going down the highway. Poppies on both sides. I mean, they could stop, hop out, pull them out and solve half the problem.
Well, I can understand your sense of irony about it, but our troops are here for one reason, which is to defeat the terrorists, to defeat the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda. If they were to jump out and start pulling up the poppy, the farmers would just replant it, and they would probably replant even more.
خو دلته بیا کوکنار چې دی تاریاک چې دی هغه تر ټولو ولایتو په هلمند کې ډېر کرل کېږي حتی د پاکستان خلک هم دلته راځي د خصوصا د هغه افغانستان د ټولو ولایتو خلک هلمند ته راځي دلته بیا خپل ځان ته یو روزي پیدا کوي الله پاک بس یو روزي ورکړي دلته نیښ وي غربت پسې راخیستې وروره ستړیاوې ډېرې دي موږ تاسو ټولو ته معلومېږي د افغانستان حالات اوس بیخي ورځ په ورځ په خرابېدو دی سمېږي نه